people, since we're all adults here and you're capable of talking. But so yes, thank you for coming. These are awesome people. They're involved in a lot of really great stuff. I'm excited to have the conversation. Thank you all for coming. Go for it, guys.
Great. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Dani Rosales. I'll be facilitating today. I'd like everybody to introduce themselves, but of course, kind of focus on your connection to immigration. So I'm a PhD student at UT Austin, or I'll be starting my PhD at UT Austin. I'm specifically doing qualitative research with undocumented Latinx folks. It's something I've done before. I focus a lot on emotional landscape and identity formation processes, but I'm also just very interested in the whole immigration debate as an immigrant myself. So I'm happy to be here.
My name is Stephanie. I'm a senior at Holland Hall, and I'm one of the participants in the Latinx affinity group at school.
Alright. I'm Rosa Hernandez. Pronouns she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. I am a DACA recipient, and I am president of Dream Alliance Oklahoma, previously known as Dream Act Oklahoma, Tulsa.
I'm Jorge, Roman-Romero. I basically got involved in the community in Tulsa for about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. I actually tried to help Rosa a lot with the movement of Dream Act Oklahoma. And now as a law student, I try to volunteer some time to attend immigration issues, which is like a need in Tulsa and around the nation. So that's my connection to the issue.
Great. So I'm going to start off with just kind of to set the tone. So the title of the talk is Dreams Detained. What do those words mean to y'all? Whoever wants to start.
First, wants to jump in? I guess I'll start. So whenever I saw that question, it came to my mind a few things. But something really stuck out, which was, what does dreams mean? Like why we use that word. And so seeing, what happens in reality, which is basically people going through so much pain through come to a foreign country with little to no support system. And so basically they having a dream of survival and dignity because they having to get displaced from where they are from. And so Dreams Detained is basically, shoving those dreams into a concentration camp and, leaving scars and traumas forever while they're trying to continue their dream of survival and dignity in another land. So that for me stuck out a lot.
Right, same. Whenever I saw the title of the panel, whatever, it really resonated with me in a lot of ways because we do use dreams in our, we have dreams, yes, when we sleep and all that stuff, but we also have dreams, like our goals and the stuff that we want to do, the places we want to go and stuff like that, and having, that's something that we all have regardless of our gender identity, who we are, if we have documents or not, if we're refugees or not, we all have those dreams, and the fact, that some of those dreams are being confined to a detention center and being pretty much taken away from people, it really resonated with me in the sense that whenever I was entirely undocumented without DACA, that's a lot of how I felt, that I couldn't have those dreams because, I just couldn't. I lacked the documentation too, and it did feel like I was trapped in a space where I couldn't escape from. As a DACA recipient, or as somebody that was undocumented, so now having these people being physically put in these concentration camps, these children also, it's an entirely different, it's like a legitimate manifestation of those feelings that I had, and I just, it's very real. It's very real to me.
Well, to me, when I read Dreams Detained, I kind of saw it as like you're given like this hope, and then once you get here, your hopes are taken away, because how they said you get put into a concentration camp, and then you're psychologically hurt, not just you, but also like the people around you, and that's why I felt.
I think Rosa, what you said is really interesting in terms of like how you felt as an undocumented person here. So I mean, like right now we've got these literal, detention centers that have turned into these concentration camps. And we see that like the dreams detained like very, very literally. And I mean, these detention centers have existed for a really long time, so we can't pretend that this is a new phenomenon. But but I think that when I saw the title, I also thought to the way that the dreams are detained for the folks who are already here, for the people who don't have documentation, and it's, it may not be a detention center, but it's those documents that are gatekeeping and that aren't allowing people to pursue education or to pursue, just a better life, pursue the dreams that they originally intended whenever they were coming to the country.
Right.
Yeah. So on that note, what do you believe are some of the biggest misconceptions about immigration and immigrants in the U.S.?
I personally feel like one of the biggest misconceptions is that there is the easy way in, or that there's a way in for people, or once you're here that you can just all of a sudden at the snap of your fingers become a citizen. There's no lengthy process. There is a incredibly risky and lengthy process to becoming a citizen or resident. And the whole immigration system is just, wasn't made for people to be able to immigrate here easily. There's so much wrong with it in the sense that I have known people myself, women, my mom has known women that have gotten married and stayed in abusive relationships just so for maybe, in the next 3-4 years of that abusive relationship, they could become residents and then keep, stay in that abusive relationship until they could become a citizen. People will put themselves through, hell and back to become citizens, or acquire residency. But it's one of the biggest misconceptions is that there is an easy way. Another one that I think, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but is that people just come here just because, they don't. People come here fleeing countries or fleeing situations like poverty, abuse, gang violence, all sorts of stuff. They're seeking political asylum as well, and it's just, we have to think about where those issues came from. Those issues just didn't happen out of nowhere, and that is one of the biggest misconceptions, is that people are just choosing to migrate here. They're not, that people are actually just being forced to migrate here, and we really need to be looking at that as well as, the immigration system here.
Absolutely. I think that the last point that Rosa mentioned, I think is very crucial. Like they come, right? And why do they come? I think it's a macro problem. I think it's the global economic system is designed in such a way that migration is just another consequence of it. And that's why economic calamities in some countries force masses of people to just move. Just like it did in prehistoric times, whenever we were not as sophisticated, and because of economics or agriculture of the land, they had to displace from where they lived and look for better land or something like that. But I think that's a very good misconception, and I think maybe later we can expand on the topic of why is this happening, why we have so many people coming from south to north, or like even this is not a US problem, this is a global problem, right? Like in Europe it's happening the same. You're seeing masses of people coming into areas of Europe. So I think that's one of the greatest misconceptions there is. And also another one that I have a problem is like semantically actually, is like the categorization of humans as illegal, right? Like a human cannot be illegal, a person cannot be illegal. Right? There's so many things wrong with that statement, not only like semantically, but even like it's a humanizing to the person who internalizes that conception that I'm illegal, so who am I? I'm less of a human, so I'm 3/4 of a human, or what is? And it's like, it's not a new concept. We've been seeing in the United States history as well, right? So I think that's another one.
Especially the dehumanization of brown and black people is something that we have seen over, not just now, but over the course of just U.S. history. We saw it with, slavery and the 3/4 of a human being issue, and then these, indigenous people being rounded up and moved, and then their cultures were being stripped away from them. We were forcing them to assimilate. So like, and especially like now, we're seeing that a lot with a lot of immigrants here. They're being forced to assimilate so they don't get caught, you know. We're forcing them to just assimilate into other cultures, into American culture, so they don't get caught or they're not seen as prime targets, you know. Yeah.
So a common misconception I know is that we're dangerous. It's something that I hate because Trump who said it, that says that we're the ones who bring drugs, we're the rapists, we're the dangerous ones, and I completely disagree. And another thing is that people associate Spanish with immigrants, and I don't think that all people who speak Spanish are immigrants. Like, there's people from France that are immigrants too, and like from other European people who are also immigrants. You know.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of the misconceptions y'all just said. And I had something in my head, and it just kind of flew out. But I think I remembered. Yeah, I think when we get to the criminalization of immigration, right? I think another big misconception that's out there is that it's like a criminal offense to be undocumented in the U.S. when being out of status. If I'm not mistaken, I'm looking at Mimi.
You are exactly right. Being here without documents is not a crime.
Right, and when we look at the way that these populations are being targeted, the way that they're being prosecuted and persecuted, and labeled illegal and labeled criminals, I mean it's factually false. Like it's literally not true. Another thing I see is this isn't necessarily around immigrants themselves, but there's a lot of misconceptions around what the heck a sanctuary city is, and maybe what it isn't. And for some reason, a lot of people think that when there's a sanctuary city, it just means that you have rampant crime everywhere. And to quote some folks from a few weeks back, heroin needles on the street, and immigrants make the cost of living go up, and these are direct quotes. But anyway, what is a sanctuary city? And I did Google it. I do have an exact definition if nobody wants to jump in.
I would like to know Google's definition.
Sure. Okay, so I Googled a sanctuary city and then I wrote it down. So the Google definition is a city whose municipal laws tend to protect undocumented immigrants from deportation or prosecution despite federal immigration law. So I think, the interesting thing about a sanctuary city is I'm not exactly sure what it really does for everyone, except for outline that they're unwilling to cooperate. But even in the verbiage used by Google, it does say tends to protect, right? And it's despite federal law. So a sanctuary city can't legalize undocumented immigrants, if they were ever illegal to begin with. And it doesn't actually protect or anything. It's not sheltering anyone. It's pretty much just an ideological statement put out there to say, we don't want to participate in this. And that's great, that's wonderful, because I think later I kind of want to get into the ideological impact of embracing undocumented folks or rejecting. But ultimately, law-wise, it doesn't really do much. So I kind of want to throw that out there, because there's a lot of misconceptions around what a sanctuary city is. And specifically, its ties to 287G, but we might get into that a little later.
Right. See, and that's, I've always heard that sanctuary cities were kind of just bull. I don't mean it, whatever, but because of just that it is an ideological thing, you're not really doing very much aside from maybe not allowing law enforcement, local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE or federal enforcement, but at the same time, they also have, if I'm correct, they can also, go into cities and just do, whatever they need to do, like these raids and stuff. And, local law enforcement can't necessarily stop them. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, so, there's really, sanctuary cities are kind of, not necessarily a misconception or just whatever, they're just not entirely, they're not as safe as a lot of people would like to make them seem or think that they are. It's just, they could still go in and raid businesses and stuff or ICE can still go in and raid businesses like that, and law enforcement really, can't really do anything about it. Local law enforcement can't do anything about it. So.
And also I heard that, I've been reading some articles about that as well, and a practical concern of sanctuary cities is that ICE is responding by performing more of collateral arrests. So if they go to do a raid basically in a workplace for 5 people and they see 4 other, let's say Hispanic-looking Latinos, because there's a lot of racial profiling with collateral arrests, they can actually take 9 of them and just say that because the local authorities are not helping us identify, we are just gonna like go ahead and make the whole sweep. So there is some practical concerns with sanctuary cities as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think what you're both saying about just this sort of like purported safety, right? I want to disagree that like a sanctuary city is like all bull, right? Because I think that there's something, there can be something helpful just about identifying that and about not signing a 287G agreement.
Yes, that's a big one.
And we'll get into a 287G agreement at some point for those of you who don't know what that is. But where was I going? Oh, yeah. I just don't think that we can call any city like a sanctuary as long as we have the federal immigration laws and the federal immigration rhetoric that we have, and ICE acting on the levels that it is. Like no place in America is going to be a sanctuary for undocumented folks as long as we have the policies in place at the federal level that we do. Speaking of the federal level, so anti-immigrant sentiment is undeniably high right now, but the Obama administration did deport more people than any previous presidential administrations. How has the landscape of immigration policies and of anti-immigrant sentiment changed since Trump took office?
That's a very interesting question, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, I think just put immigration into like a blue or red like framework, I think it's completely, it's just wrong. The Obama administration also deported millions of people using the same framework that Trump is using. So I think the problem is more comprehensive than that. The only thing that is more concerning about the new administration is that actually Trump is using xenophobia and racism as a political strategy to garner support, and it has been successful, right? It hasn't been the first time that the strategy has been utilized. If we remember a little bit of history, and Germany maybe in the 40s. But, so it's a little bit concerning that that's the way the administration is going, and that it's been successful. That's the more worrisome part. But, so, and then Obama did not have that. For instance, it's just a new Trump administration. And also it's a global tendency as well, because if you see Brexit, it's the same sentiment in the United Kingdom that is allowing for Brexit to happen. So that are very, very concerning phenomena that I think we need to like monitor closely, because it can lead to like very troublesome things.
Yeah, I can repeat the question. So I was basically saying, we know the Obama administration deported hella people.
Right.
So how has the landscape of immigration policies and of anti-immigrant sentiment changed since Trump took office? Like, what are the nuances of this political administration?
Well, for me, I feel like the Obama, to me, kind of seemed more calmer. But now that Trump took over, it's like letting the racist people like be released, I guess you could say. And I don't know if you guys seen the video. It's like about Omar, where they're like
Send her back.
Yeah, send her back. He let them chance it for 13 seconds. Armstrong walked the moon for 13 seconds. It took him that long. And just like Obama, you never heard these things come out. And then like Trump is just like, oh.
Right. I totally agree. Like, I mean, how vocal this administration is, like, it's helping a lot of just, I mean, it's helping them gain a lot more traction for people to be okay with this. Under the Obama administration, they weren't vocal. You didn't just see these, you didn't see it in the headlines. You always saw it in the little scrolly bar, under like, oh, so many people got detained. You never saw it plastered everywhere. And now, you're seeing all of this like all over the news. Nobody's afraid to say, to encourage this racist rhetoric anymore, or anti-immigrant rhetoric anymore, and that's, I mean, yes, it's incredibly dangerous, but at least we know these people's intentions. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with, are there any benefits to these operations being any less clandestine than they were before? I think whereas before we kind of, a lot of people didn't know like that it was going on. Now there's like uprising, but at the same time, because there's like so much publicity around it, because the president is signing off on it, it's empowering the folks who maybe have this like racism just living inside to just kind of let it out, and it's giving them a platform to support, and it's turned into a really strong political platform. I mean, he's running on it.
Definitely.
How do you feel about Trump's move to add a question about citizenship to the U.S. Census? Other than horrified.
It's just, he's institutionalizing racism and xenophobia, right? I don't know any other, I think it's just using us, again, like the same political tool, right? And yeah, it would be institutionalizing, I think, xenophobia, which is concerning, I think. I think that's the simplest way to put it.
I mean, we really have to think about, like, why. I mean, yeah, they're saying why, but, like, is this really, like, is their why the legitimate reason that they're actually wanting to implement this question? And honestly, I mean, it can make things so much easier for them to be able to use that information, because, to be able to round up undocumented peoples that have been in the United States for years, and that wouldn't be the first time that we would see something like that happen, So, I mean, we just have to think about the real reason why this is, why this administration is trying to push this question.
Right.
And we need to look back and think about any other instances where we might have seen this in the past, and what happened then.
And I think it's important to realize that, like, these people are like Americans. It's the only place they know to call home. They just don't have like this paper. That's all it is. So what is citizenship, right? I mean, in terms of like the legal document that it will be added to the form.
I mean, personally, I know so many people without documentation that are more law-abiding citizens, or more law-abiding peoples than people with documentation.
Right.
A lot of people with documentation, a lot of people without documents, we tend to drive the speed limit. We, use our blinkers. We make little stops at stop signs because we are afraid, of deportation and of being detained. A lot of people who don't have that fear don't necessarily realize the severity of municipal and small crimes, one small thing and then you can, get bundled into, ISIS system and there you go, that's it. For people who don't necessarily have that fear, you get a ticket,
Right.
go to jail overnight,
Oops.
oops,
Continue.
yeah, slap on the wrist.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly a sense of heightened consequences, right, and disproportionately so, which I think is the important part of that. I think I know the answer to my next question, but I'll ask it
Did you
anyway.
have an answer?
We made eye contact.
Okay, good.
So, do you feel that anti-immigrant sentiment is racialized? The answer is yes. What are anti-immigrant policies, whether in writing, in practice, and in what ways? Yeah, I'll repeat. Okay. Do you feel the anti-immigrant sentiment is racialized? And what about anti-immigrant policies, whether in writing, in practice, and in what ways?
Oh, interesting. I think, all of that we've been talking about, I think it plays into that immigration narrative, right? But another thing that is important, I think, for people to realize is that, so people who support this anti-immigration policy based on the narrative, they're played in a narrative that I think has something economic in nature, because globalization, I think, is affecting workers a lot. I think they're not in a good place globally. And so instead of saying, this is the real reasons why it's happening, which are very complex, just saying and putting a concrete face to the problem is just easier. So why are you in the state of frustration that you are because of your working conditions and living conditions? Is because of that guy that just came from South, and that's the guy that you should be mad about. And so I think that narrative plays well into certain folks because they're desperate too. They're desperate people who are struggling in a day-to-day life in the United States. And so I think that narrative, that's why it's so powerful as well.
I definitely agree with that. Like a lot of people don't necessarily have answers that we are looking for. Why is poverty such an issue? I mean, we don't want to blame a system or, a government that has for so long been told that will be there to protect us and to do us right. I mean, you look at, and we listen to them and then they're like, yeah, it's your neighbor, it's that brown guy over there, or it's that black guy over there. And people immediately take a grasp of that and they're like, you know what, that is the only reason because that is the new factor here and I'm going to take it and run with it. I do think that yeah, race does play a really big issue in it. I mean, also, we see a lot of racial profiling whenever people are being deported. I mean, I saw a funny tweet on Facebook, or a screenshot on Facebook, was that it mentioned something about like white immigrants, being told, you came here the right way, right? And then
That's the assumption made, right?
Yeah, that's always the assumption that's made that, some people just come the right way, and it's always, for some reason, white immigrants that come here the right way. What if they were told that, no, there are immigrants that are white that are also undocumented, that came the wrong way, and I mean, that would be like a total shocker. Like, whoa, you could do that.
Well, like, adding on to what he said about the jobs, like, something they usually say is like, well, like, you guys are stealing our jobs, which is not true, because you can go offers, like, I've seen it, like, I think there was, I forgot where I saw it, but some guy offered some homeless man $15 to cut their yard, so they could get an actual job, and they could be getting paid, and he said no. And, you're getting offered a job, you're getting paid, not everyone's stealing your jobs, so.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about kind of the scapegoating really plays into it, right? You have like this systemic issue going on, but it's so much easier to blame a group of people that you can like wall out with your arbitrarily defined borders. And I think the racialization of that scapegoating image just makes it all the more powerful. Like if you can really, really define the enemy, and that's what it's turned into, right? Is the enemy. Then you can just kind of fearmonger some more and just kind of like pile on the hate. But then it gets into that like profiling. And we've seen it like really kind of blatantly in this administration. We talk a lot about, like Latinx folks and Hispanic folks, but, we've had like a lot of Muslim immigration. We literally had like a travel ban. So, and it was unapologetically like called a Muslim travel ban.
And like you said, and it's so faulty in so many levels, that narrative, right? Because the last time I checked, the influx of immigration, the biggest influx of immigration come from Asia. And you only talk about Hispanics, and it's just a narrative that is faulty in so many angles.
Definitely. But I also, want to just throw in there that it's not, I mean, it's a very easy way to pin people against each other, to keep them from looking at the real issue, which is, there's a reason why two groups of people are being pinned against each other like that. And that is what we need to be looking at a lot, is why these working class, two working classes of people are being pinned against each other. Like, what more is there to that? Like, when, instead of like fighting each other, like, what is there that we should be fighting? Because, I mean, could do a lot more damage.
Yeah, absolutely.
if we could just, just not.
Right. Somebody's benefiting from these groups not working together.
Exactly. Thank you.
So, not to put it straight on Rosa, but I know Rosa will have the experience to answer this question. So, I'd kind of like to talk about the power imbalance that's created when you like come out as undocumented. No, not you, as in like you specifically, but just you, Rosa. No, but just in general.
Honestly, well, that's a kind of a deep question for me. Personally.
Don't want to answer it.
No, you're good. I'll fucking answer. Why not?
Okay.
So, like, personally, my personal coming out story as undocumented came after I came out as queer, pansexual when I was younger. And I'm going to do that because it was so much easier to come out as queer than it was to come out as undocumented. because I wasn't, it's just so much, there's so much more fear to coming out, or to me personally, there was so much more fear coming out as undocumented because I had, black, brown, white friends. I didn't know what their responses would be. I always heard this hateful, rhetoric of, go back to Mexico. Oh, we're gonna, just you jump over the wall, or I bet you know how to swim really good. Even they didn't even know about my documentation or my status, my legal status. But I always heard these very crappy jokes just made at brown and black people about us not having documentation, which was it always just drove so much fear into me. Just like, oh my gosh. If I do come out as undocumented, if I tell people I don't have papers, they're gonna hate me, because they've made all these nasty jokes at me, and they don't even actually know. So it was so much easier to come out as something that is all that harder, that much is hard to come out. But anyways, when I did come out as undocumented, it was terrifying. I felt much more like I was much more of a target. I felt incredibly paranoid for the first maybe half year of me being undocumented. But whenever I saw that there were, other undocumented peoples that came out and were so vocal and would say that they didn't have papers without fear, like in their voices. One of those people was Jordan Mazariego, who was the previous president of GAOK, who was one of the people that influenced me very heavily in being so unapologetic about my lack of documentation. But whenever I did own it, and whenever I did come out entirely as undocumented, I felt so powerful, because there was that was one thing that people couldn't jab me with, they couldn't hurt me with those jokes anymore, because I knew what I was, and I knew that I didn't have documentation, and I know that. But I also know that I'm a human being. So just coming out and being able to say that I don't have papers, and that is totally fucking fine. I'm sorry, that is totally fine. It just feels great, and it's such an intimidating factor in a lot of people, because that is something that people use to make you more fearful, to intimidate you, because they know that you're brown. And so whenever you own it and you're like, yeah, I know I'm brown, and I know I don't have papers, and I know I'm this, so what? I'm still gonna show up, and I'm still gonna fight for this, and I'm still going to say what I need to say, and fight against this racist and anti-immigrant system. It strikes fear in people. For instance, Gregolato. For some reason, just can't sit still in the same room that I'm in. He can't. There was a time you were there when we were at the county commissioner meeting. He got up incredibly loudly when I went on to the podium to speak at this county commissioners meeting, and he got up incredibly loudly and made as much noise as he could leaving the room while I was speaking. So it's personally, I feel like it's intimidating and it's powerful when you can actually own it and not be afraid. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
No,
sorry.
of course it does. Jorge, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Rosa is actually the perfect person to show that that power dynamic that she just described awesomely, by the way. So.
Stephanie, did you want to add anything? No. All right. Well, raids, detentions, and deportations clearly affect the person actually being, detained and deported. But we know that the impact goes a lot further than that. So what broader effects do detention and deportation cause? And I've got follow-up questions to that veer in different directions, but I'll start with just that.
I think one that comes to my mind real fast is it disrupts communities, it disrupts families, in ways that are not only physically, right, but psychologically as well, because there's a lot of trauma on these processes. There's a lot of concern, there's a lot of issues going on, so I think the disruption at so many levels, I think is something that comes into my mind very fast whenever I think about it.
Absolutely. I think, at that family level you have, you literally have an absent person in the home, and oftentimes that person's going to be the breadwinner. And so you've got, a lack of income, but then at the community level, you have a lot of disruption, right? And there's waves of fear that come about from seeing somebody get picked up.
One thing I do want to add to that is one of the things that we don't often think about is the children that are left here whenever people do get deported. A lot of the time the older sibling has to take on this parental role in the household to help the mother or help the person that was left. take care of the children, put them to bed, help them with their homework. They now have this role of having to be a caretaker and a parent to their little siblings. Something that they might not be all too familiar with. All of a sudden you have to help your brother with their homework. This kid is having to do their homework as well. So, you're taking away so much from these children, not just a parent, but also their childhood. They're having to take on these responsibilities that a lot of other children don't necessarily have to take on. You're taking away these children's livelihoods.
Oh, well, sorry for making so many references to other things, but I don't know if you guys have seen Jane the Virgin. Jane's best friend, I forgot her name, but she made this video about how when she was in middle school, she went to school and both her parents got deported. And she said that at school, she didn't know why, but she had this odd feeling. And she went to the phone and called her parents and no one picked up. And her parents got deported. So she had to live all throughout high school with a friend. And she said she got psychologically hurt. And when she got to go visit her parents, she said that she didn't want to be there anymore. She did not feel that her parents were her parents because her parents weren't there for her when she needed them. And I feel not just the people who are being deported are getting hurt, but also the family members, which is very important because a middle schooler, how old are they, 12? They're getting hurt. It's horrible.
Right. And we're seeing this family separation more and more. We have the separation caused by deportation, but then also literal family separation that we're doing when people arrive at the border, when people arrive at the country. We're separating infants from their parents, and some of those infants are getting put up for adoption. Some of those infants are never going to see those parents again. Some of those infants reunite with the parents, and the parents and that bond hasn't formed, and that's it. That's for life, right? So what psychological effects are caused by anti-immigrant sentiment and policies and by highly publicized immigrant removal efforts, and how does this impact daily life, and how does this affect our immigrant children? So we kind of already started talking about this. It was the second half of this question, so probably just should have thrown it in at the beginning, but.
I think it definitely forces, immigrant communities to live on survival mode. You don't want to go out and enjoy, your evenings after you get off work if you work in the mornings, or you don't want to enjoy anything because you're just afraid of getting pulled over, getting round up, or something like that. You are forced to just live in the survival, work, sleep kind of, schedule, and it's just, it's not a way to live at all. Nobody should have to live in any fear. It's so unjust and it's disgusting, and it's awful for children who live in these households as well to see their parents in so much fear. To hear on the to hear your parent come home, turn on the TV. Oh, I can't go do anything tomorrow morning, or I can't do anything in the evening because they're saying that ICE is going to be in these areas, or ICE is going to be doing this, or they arrested certain people here, we can't go out this weekend. And personally, I have seen that direct effect of that in my family, and it's horrible, it's terrifying, and it's horrifying seeing children have to go through that, and especially whenever children, for instance, my 15-year-old brother, having to text me all through the evening because he's afraid that our stepfather hasn't gotten home from work yet, or that, we heard that ICE is going to, in certain areas, and that's where our stepfather is going to be working. And he's 15 years old, for Christ's sakes. That's not supposed to be what they're worried about. My 8-year-old little brother also is going through a similar situation where he doesn't necessarily understand government or how that works. He just knows that somebody might come and pick up my mom or pick them up whenever they're out, and they don't go to Cece's Pizza as often now because the kids just don't want to go. And they love going to Cece's Pizza. That's their favorite place to go eat, and they just don't want to do it as often unless I go with them. So it's terrifying and it's awful, and I've seen it in my siblings, my mother and my older brother, who is also a DACA recipient and doesn't, I mean, he just doesn't do anything. He goes home, goes to work, he's 25. I mean, he should be traveling, doing something, you know. I mean, he just doesn't do anything. He comes and he goes and he visits my mom and takes my siblings over sometime, but they never really do very much because we live in so much fear, and it's just so disgusting that there's so much fear being pushed on to these children and families, and it's just really has to stop.
And I think like this is very important to hear, because like putting immigration in a political context is just easy, you know, like I say at the beginning, like to put it into blue or red, like, oh, we didn't do that, or oh, okay, we're doing this. In that framework, like we're dealing with like daily lives of people and like of families and of children and of parents that wanna keep their children safe. So I think like we have to be very, very careful to put all these, what Rosa just described, into political context, because it can simplify the powerful dynamics and the bad dynamics that go on in a family or in a household.
And I think the narrative that, you know, Rosa's talking about, you know, they're using just their family structure, but as someone who did, you know, research where I was specifically like interviewing undocumented immigrants, just about these things, about this fear, about, or I wasn't necessarily asking them about the fear, but that's what came up, right? And I had, you know, a lot of like crying mothers telling me about their children, who were saying like, you know, are you gonna be taken away from me? Like, and like you said, like they don't understand, they don't know the process, they don't know what's going on, but that they don't have to understand the process, and the process doesn't have to happen to them for them to be affected by it, because they know what's going on and they see their parents, and even if they don't know that their parents, even if they don't know their parents' documentation status, which is often the case in a lot of these families, a lot of these kids don't know that they're undocumented or that their parents are undocumented. But we touch back on that racialization, right? You see your, you know, South or Central American parent, and you see all these like South and Central American people on TV being labeled as illegal, and you start to feel that fear, and you start to feel like they're going to be taken away. And other kids start to see that as well. I had, when I was interviewing one parent, she was telling me about her daughter who was being asked at school, like, oh, show me your green card, just by like other kids at school, because they're hearing these things, because they're seeing these things, and it's becoming part of their lives. We see it on the media a lot, and we have like so many different ways to consume media, and we can't assume that everybody who's consuming this media has the context for it, and knows what to do with it, and so it's dangerous. So I'd like to talk a little bit about 287G, and its stated intention versus its actual impact. Would anybody kind of like to talk about what 287G is? If not, I can talk a little bit about it, but...
I think Rosa has been part of the campaign for a while.
Yeah, the coalition to end 287G.
Well, there's a lot. But we actually have somebody here that has been working with the coalition to end 287G, and she's from TU in law.
You got this.
And
You
I
know
would
what
definitely
this is.
love for me to
You can do
elaborate
this.
a little bit more.
You know this. Just do it.
Okay. Anyway, we work a lot with in-law at TU, which they're like super fucking great. I love them. Super great. Sorry.
I like being fucking good.
Right? Yeah. So 287G is a contract that we have with our sheriff's department. It's a county contract that we have. It's supposed to be renewed every 2 years. And so what it does, it allows allows sheriffs to work as ICE officers within our county jail. So that being said, anybody that goes through the county jail is susceptible to ICE, or they're accessible to ICE, and you know they're put into the system, and then ICE can say, you know, I need this person, I need to hold on this person, and then you can be put into deportation proceedings. I guess that's it put simply. Yeah, as simply as I can understand it.
Right, yeah. So it essentially just, you know, it deputizes local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration law, which, you know, like on a taxpayer level, if we like really want to get into that, You know, like why are our local law enforcement carrying out the duties of federal officials?
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it doesn't allow officers to act as ICE officers outside of the county jail. That doesn't mean that people cannot be racially profiled, and it doesn't mean that people can't be, pulled over for absolutely no reason, or for minor traffic violations and then funneled into the county jail. So that's kind of where there's this misconception that our sheriff tends to exploit is that is what he doesn't understand that people are being profiled and people are being stopped for very minor traffic violations because they probably look like immigrants, and then once they realize, oh, this person doesn't have a driver's license, they don't have insurance, you're going into the county jail. Once you're there, you're probably going to get processed and deported.
So the stated intention of 287G is basically that, whenever somebody's picked up for an offense and they serve time or whatever, afterward, we don't want that person, if they're not from here, to be released back into the community. We can get into why that's problematic, because if somebody else gets picked up for the exact same thing, they get released back into the community, but I guess that's a duality that we're willing to live with for whatever reason. I'm not. The collective we that doesn't include me is willing to live with. But you don't have to be convicted for this process to work. So I was reading, I was looking at the 287G agreement on the USCIS page, which is 5,000 nightmares, that website. And it's purporting how popular this is, as if people aren't ending their 287G agreements around the country left and right. They are. But it's essentially saying we don't want these criminals back in our community, just send them back to where they came from, is essentially what it's saying. But the thing is, like I said, you don't have to be convicted, so it can be just charges. You can pick somebody up, charge them for something, and later drop those charges, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a lot of the people who are kind of data mining are what's going on here in Tulsa. That's happening a lot. You're getting a lot of people who are being picked up on petty charges, being booked, and once they're booked, they can be handed over to ICE, and those charges can be dropped. And we know what those people look like, right? Because they're getting picked up for that reason. So then we get back into the racialization of things, and it's just a big old nightmare. But supposedly, what 287G is doing is keeping us safer. But in reality, what it seems to be doing is making it so that our immigrant communities don't feel like they can call law enforcement, because how are you going to trust law enforcement who has this agreement with ICE, right? How are you? What do you do? And as much as they can tell you, we're not going to show up, and we're going to show up and we're going to do what we're supposed to do, we're not going to ask about your documentation, how do you trust that?
Right. And we have had people that we work with see instances of people who have made calls, domestic violence calls, have the victim or have just the victim being picked up and not the abuser, or and then they're being processed, because there's this language barrier, and then you have this person that has already had charges, against them, and then they're in the system, and then what are you supposed to do after that? ICE just gets a hold of you, and your charges are either dismissed or, and then that's it. That's it. You're traumatizing this person after they're already going through this traumatic domestic violence experience, and then you're like, okay, well, I guess, you're already here, so might as well just send you back. It's terrifying. It's re-traumatizing this person, and, what are you supposed to do?
Right.
Yeah. And Vic has said, if you do get racially profiled, or if there is an issue, you can just call me and I'll totally get you out. What power does this? What power does he have over a federal agency? Which is, the answer is none. So he can't. Once somebody already has an ICE hold, you cannot, unless you get bail, bond, it's $5,000.
There's no bond for ICE holds in Tulsa County. So if you're on an ICE hold, you will not get bail or bond for any kind of criminal charges, so that you're not getting out.
And I mean, if you get picked up for something like, you know, a DUI, something where maybe they were just gonna like hold you overnight, wait till you were sober, and then you were gonna pay fines or whatever, and now you're being held because you've been turned over to ICE, you're not being transported somewhere else. Like, you're just going to sit in the county jail until like this process goes on. So in addition to that, like, we're just taking up like a whole lot of room and resources for our jail to act as a detention center. Which is, it effectively is a lot.
Definitely.
So I think, Jorge, you talked a little bit about this, but what are collateral arrests?
Okay, so it's a fancy euphemism for raids, right? So ICE goes to workplaces or to like neighborhoods and, you know, trying to find or to arrest 3 people, right? But if in the collateral purview there are other, let's say, Asian or Hispanic looking folks, they actually can just sweep the area, bring them to a center, and then kind of ask the questions, right? So like basically arrest first, then ask what's up with your status. Which is very concerning legally. If the immigration system was somewhat compatible or aligned with the Constitution, this will bring like a lot of due process violations, I believe, and a lot of constitutional problematics, since the immigration system is functional. Well, it functions as they designed it actually. So, but it's very worrisome. It's just concerning. You can just be working and you can just be taken.
Right.
Because they were looking for someone to your left. So.
Right. And I think it really undermines, you know, we have this like stated intention of 287G and of all these other like, you know, immigrant removal type acts or whatever you want to call them, where we're like targeting the criminally, you know, we're targeting the criminals who are undocumented. You know, we've already kind of debunked that. But collateral arrests are like the ultimate debunking of that. Like, it's literally like you go in to pick up somebody who has, you know, who has like a removal order, and because other people are around and undocumented, you question and you say like, are you undocumented? And because they're ICE and they're there to remove undocumented people, they like have the power to take you. Like, they have the power to do that. I know pretty recently there were a lot of talks of ICE going, and it was right around the time when Donald Trump was like, we're gonna up the raids. Pretty recently there was a lot of talk of just ICE coming in and coming into different like restaurants around town and asking about status. And so I just started seeing like all these posts on Facebook, right, of people that are like, hey, if you like work with somebody who you know has a deportation order and you are undocumented, maybe don't show up to work for a while because you could become a collateral arrest. And we talk about, you know, like halting people's lives. We talk about dreams detained, like you're just gonna lock yourself up in your home because you're afraid that you're going to be not accidentally, because it's on purpose, right?
Right.
That's giving somebody too much credit if I call it an accident.
Yeah,
But-
but I mean, you also think about it, like, just don't go to work for a while. I mean, a lot of these people aren't making livable wages, and they rely on every dollar that they are making when they're working. So you're telling some of these people, yeah, maybe just don't go to work, you know, I don't know. And that's kind of where, and I'm sorry to interrupt you so much, but that's kind of where, like, I mean, that's where we need a lot of communal support from people in the community. Like, if you know somebody that is undocumented, like, yes, tell them not to go to work, but also buy them groceries, for fuck's sakes. And buy them groceries, take them out, you know, not just, you know, don't just give them the bare minimum, which is food, you know, shelter, whatever. I mean, I've had friends who have opened up their homes, who opened up their apartments and homes last week and the weekend before, I'm not sure, I don't remember, when they were going to be doing another roundup, supposedly, for people who didn't feel safe in their homes, you know, here in Tulsa. And they're like, yeah, they can just crash at our place for the weekend, you know, we have groceries, everything like that. But the thing is that once you're putting these people in these situations, yes, I mean, you're buying them groceries, you're giving them a place to live, you're giving them a place to survive, that is all you're giving them. You're not giving them the things that they need to be able to feel like human beings with dignity and and whatnot. So just, I mean, instead of just giving them the basic needs, means to survive, also give them little luxuries like take your undocumented friends out for a movie, take their family out for a movie. I mean, it's
Take them to CC's.
take them to CC's for fuck's sake. Like, do something. I'm sorry. Do something for these people that doesn't feel like you're just doing the bare minimum. Because if you're just doing the bare minimum, it's not enough. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're good, you're good. I did want to backtrack a little bit in terms of the targeting criminals portion, because I actually wanted to mention this a little bit when we were talking about the nuances in the Trump administration versus the Obama administration. There was recently a report from a reputable source, but I forgot it, which makes it seem unreputable, but I promise it was reputable. It was talking about just kind of the proportions of, the I can't remember if it was detentions or deportations, but how many, undocumented immigrants were deporting on criminal charges versus non-criminal, and that's been inverse since the Trump and Obama administration switched. So under the Obama administration, there were a lot of deportations going on, but a lot of the immigrants that were being deported had criminal charges. Again, I kind of spoke to the fact that I don't think that's fair either, but still, in this administration, we're seeing a lot more people who don't have any kind of criminal charges, just perfectly, their only offense is to be here without documentation. And we're seeing an uptick, a significant uptick in how many, in those situations. So, again, we see all this rhetoric about targeting criminals, about this image of the people that we're trying to get out of this country, and it's just false.
And also, what is criminality?
Right.
Who defines that? And that is a very dangerous, very slippery slope.
Absolutely.
It can be, referring back to some time back, in Germany, it was it was criminal to be Jewish, to have certain faiths, to love certain people, to be a certain color, even then. So you just really have to think about it. What is criminal, and who is defining that, and is that just, and is that moral? And it is up to us as people to define that and to hold our systems accountable to those definitions of criminality and justice. Yeah.
And I think the criminality, I think that's just a political stunt, to be honest. The system doesn't filter that way. It just sweeps and keeps going, and the filters that they're supposed to have for criminality, they don't work. It's just whoever gets into the sweeping. So it's just literally, because it sounds nice. Yeah, we're removing criminals, so you're gonna be safe. Oh, thank you very much. So it doesn't work that way. It's just a political marketing,
Right.
if you will.
Yeah, means of justification.
Right.
All right. So we can't have this conversation without talking about the importance of knowing your rights as an undocumented person. What are some of those rights, and how does ICE benefit from an uninformed populace?
One of the rights is that they need a warrant, a signed warrant, to be able to come knocking at your door and taking you. And a lot of people without documentation fear law enforcement. So, they don't know that they can say, no, I'm not going. They don't know that they have access to an attorney. They don't know that if they don't have a warrant with your name on it that is signed by a judge, you don't have to go, and you do not have to open your door. And that is one of the things that ICE really takes advantage of, is the fact that you don't have to, and that you have access to an attorney still, and you just have access to that, and that in and of itself can be incredibly helpful for somebody. Just knowing that you don't have to go and you can say no. Yeah.
And also just what basically was Rosa said, the most concerning part is they don't know they have rights in the first place. So because they don't know they have rights, how we're supposed to expect them to know what they are? And yeah, one of the Rosa says that ICE explodes a lot is a judge signed warrant, because ICE shows up with a warrant made by the federal entity, by ICE, saying, it looks very official and says warrant, but it's not signed by a judge. And the Constitution requires for them to have a judge sign warrant, which is an extra step that they need to take, and they don't. They just show up with that paper, because people don't know, they open the door, which I think basically means that it waives entrance, and you waive your right, and so they can take you, right? So that's why whenever I went to San Antonio to see some people that were like sent from the detention center close to San Antonio to the Greyhound. We explained them a lot, some of their rights and the processes they were in, and tell them like, don't open your door. Ask them for them to put that piece of paper, show them throughout the window or under the door, so, and you look for this word, because that's another thing. Some people that they come, in the experience I had, like they had no idea of where they're getting into. I was telling and explaining, so you're sent to Dallas from here, and from Dallas you're gonna be put into a bus and go to Houston. And they were like, what is Dallas? What's Houston? I don't know what's happening. So like, oh, okay, so like in the Google Maps, kind of trying to explain as much as I can, right, in Spanish, like what is, like why they have to do it. And like also like literally had to write the word judge in English for them to like, in the case it happens, they actually go and look for that word in the paper, right? And like, we're talking in a very like a scary situation. Like if law enforcement shows up, you're gonna be very scared. Like sometimes they're gonna even not look at the word that I wrote in their documents because it's very volatile and very fast-moving situation. So like, it is very concerning. Like it's very, very concerning what's happening, and you know, expecting them to know stuff that they simply can't is like. Right.
It's like asking somebody who never even has heard an English word in, for 20 years of their life, all of a sudden we're asking them to know all of this stuff and know the word warrant, know the word judge, know the word, all of this terminology that we're asking them. So it's incredibly unfair and unjust.
And to remember it in like a moment of incredible duress.
Exactly. Like, I know I forget everything like all the time. And it's just, it's ridiculous. You wouldn't ask somebody like, who is in all of a sudden in an awful, crappy situation, in a terrifying situation, to remember the name of all this, all of these words. So it's so unfair.
Well, since you guys pretty much covered like the best parts to do, something I do to help people who don't have like papers, as they call it, is like you can share there's like these posts that tell you what your rights are. You can share them all over social media. You don't know if one of your friends is undocumented and they just never told you, or they lied to you, because you never know. And also you can like, in case like example like the thing that happened in Broken Arrow where they raided, like you can say like you don't want to give them your ID, so they could like take the focus off of this person and they can like leave and they can focus on you, because they're gonna wonder like, why aren't you like showing us your ID? Like, why aren't you this? Why aren't you that? So those are just some tips I would use.
Right. Definitely, I think interfering with any sort of raid or any sort of arrest is one of the best things that people with privilege and people with citizenship can do, especially our white allies who have citizenship. Yeah, they're federal agents and you are interfering with that, but you are one of the only things that can help somebody remain in the United States with their families. And if you do ever see that, I really do hope that if anybody in this room ever does see a situation like that happen with a brown or black person, definitely interfere with that situation, because you can be the only thing that could keep that person here. And literally each and every one of you. So take that as a burden and use it.
Well, you guys segued really well. What can U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents do to help protect the vulnerable people in the undocumented community? Interfere a lot.
That, yes. If you're not there yet, if you're not at that point to where you feel comfortable with interfering with a federal agent, write and call to your, local county commissioners like here, or your senators, Congress people, and tell them how concerned you are about, the state of issues right now. But I do feel like direct action and direct interference with arrests, housing undocumented peoples who are living in fear, giving them helping them financially with food and all that kind of stuff. Transportation is a big, huge one. I know my mom calls me every time that she leaves the house, and every time when she gets home from wherever she's going. just so we can make sure that, or just so I can make sure that she's fine and totally safe. But any situation any instance that I can give her a ride somewhere, I definitely will. So that's like one of the biggest things, giving rides to people, taking them, buying them groceries, doing those kinds of things, just to keep these people from putting themselves at risk, or these people from us, keeping us from putting ourselves at risk. Yeah, interfering with arrests. Volunteering, donating. Volunteer
Join
with
your local orgs.
Exactly, yeah, join your local orgs, donate to your local organizations like Dream Alliance Oklahoma. New Sanctuary Network does a lot of work. So just donate to those organizations and become more involved. Learn the bare minimum of immigration law. I mean, there's little things that we just kind of stated, but I mean, none of us are attorneys. Well, I'm not an attorney.
I'm not an attorney.
Yeah, we're not attorneys, so I mean, and we, know the minimum of what we can be telling people and how we can be helping people out. I know someone who had been printing out those forms that you had mentioned and leaving them at businesses, in places, so people can pick them up and take them. Little things like that can really go a long way and can really be incredibly helpful. We talk a lot.
It's good.
Educating just friends, family, having a conversation about immigration that does not need to be very political in nature, just sharing some facts about like the narrative, about what the immigration context really looks like, it's not a Mexico thing, there's just a narrative that simply it's not even crossing the border. Most of the immigration influx comes from airplanes actually. They're just simple facts that can really destroy that narrative that, goes into racial profiling that we've been talking, that goes into many, many other branches of problems that we have to deal with. So having those hard conversations with people, and civilly, and just try to educate as much as you can in your daily basis.
Absolutely, and I think that, not only just educating on the facts, but also humanizing the whole narrative. Because we talk about it, and it is so political. We talk about policies and we talk about numbers, and we have little bits and pieces of human stories in there, but at the end of the day, these are people and families, and that's who's being affected by this. So it's important that piece gets put in there, every step of the way, and that we don't forget the actual real people that are being affected by all of what's going on. So what does a just and not reckless ICE look like to you, or can it exist at all?
I do not think ICE, because for me, how I see it, ICE is simply a consequence of a bad approach to immigration law to begin with. Immigration, as I kind of briefly mentioned, is a global phenomenon. It's not a Mexico, South America, United States conflict. It's just it's a global phenomenon. We've been immigrating since we were, around with Homo Neanderthals and different. We just migrate. That's our species, and we need to start tackling the immigration issue globally. We need to start developing global infrastructure around it. I think is the only way to go, because also there's two main reasons why people migrate. One is economic in nature, the other one is environmental in nature. We are about to hit a phase where climate change is getting to a point where we're going to see way even more masses and masses of people either dying or just moving, right? And so if we don't have global infrastructure to deal with that, it's going to be very complicated, and the system itself, the immigration system, is going to collapse. Because it's not built, because it's not a nation-state problem, it's a global problem, right? So I think just ICE is just fundamentally incapable of addressing the issue at any point, right? And I'm not saying abolishing all entities around, federal entities around immigration, because you still need some framework nationally, right? But the role that ICE plays, it is it's gonna have to end at some point.
Right.
Like it's gonna have to be abolished.
So I'm 23, and how many of you guys are 23 or older? Okay, so we, right, so ICE is older than I am, or I am older than ICE. Like, ICE was established because of 9/11. And I mean, that's just as simply as we can put it. And we had done all of this for so long without ICE. ICE is a completely useless entity, federal agency, and I mean that is my personal opinion.
Sure.
And I do think that we could do without. We had been for so long, and we could continue to do without ICE. Just, I mean, it's a waste of taxpayer money, and we had been, I mean, people had been immigrating for so long before that to the United States. So why do we need it now?
Yeah.
That's that.
I think that kind of gets into, you know, when we talk about like these enforcement agencies that people like demand we allow to continue to work the way they've been working, and these laws that people are saying, you know, but it's the law and you've got to follow this thing, and like there's this like narrative that seems to ignore the fact that like our whole country is based on these laws being like malleable, and our ability to like amend and change these things, and not only our ability to, but like our responsibility to amend and change these things as we see fit, right? So I don't know where I was going with that at the beginning, but I also hate ICE. Okay.
Also, I mean, because I mean, ICE pretty much just, I mean, I'm just putting it simply, you guys can go home and read a lot more about it, but I mean, it did come from this whole issue of 9/11 and all these terrorists and yada yada yada. I mean, it came from this very racist idea that brown people were terrorists and the enemy, and we needed to find a way to keep them in check. You know, and that's kind of just, I mean, that's how it generated. And I think that a lot of us really need to educate ourselves on systems that are created and made up, and agencies that are made up because of these racist narratives. And we need to question a lot of that kind of stuff, especially right now. But yeah, I mean, it's racist. It was racist, continues to be racist, and it just doesn't need to be here. It's my personal opinion.
Right, and it's completely incompatible with globalization, the global economy, where you can have free entrance of goods, but you restrict heavily the entrance of labor. So it's even a paradox to even talking in those terms. And also, like, I think we need to just start contemplating the idea that we need to start creating financial bridges around the world instead of concrete walls. Like, they don't solve the problem at all. They just divide further the issue.
So this is switching gears just a little bit, and I don't know how we're doing on time.
About 15 minutes in Q&A.
Okay, wonderful on the last few questions. So, but switching gears, how does status impinge on the ability and willingness of undocumented people to engage in activism, political demonstrations, etc.?
How does status what, sorry?
Impinge on the ability and willingness.
I like was halfway listening, and then I tuned
That's
totally
fine.
in, and I was like, wait.
No, it's okay. But yeah, how does, you know, the willingness of, we've got a lot of political demonstrations going on surrounding immigration, but you've got like a really vulnerable population that we're asking to show up to these things, right? So I just kind of wanted to talk about that.
Definitely. So right now, I really just want to mention that, what time is it? It's like 2? So like
No, it's,
Oh shit. Oh. So this morning there was a group of people down in Oklahoma City, or not Oklahoma City, a group of Tulsans plus Oklahoma City folks plus some other folks that went down to Fort Sill and Lawton. Kind of jumbled. And they engaged in some direct action, and it was just tons of people, and it was just so amazing and inspiring to see. People who were DACA recipients and people who were citizens and other people who don't have any sort of documentation whatsoever out there, you know, putting themselves on the line, protesting, marching, doing all this stuff. I think that status at this point, I mean, yes, it is something that a lot of us would love to have, legal status here. But at the same time, I don't think that, personally, I don't feel like like we can afford. Like I personally, this is my personal opinion, I cannot afford to not be vocal anymore. And if I did lose my DACA status, I would still be vocal because, I mean, really DACA, how much does it actually protect us now? Not very much. But I do feel like, yes, it is something that a lot of us would love to have, but it's not something that I personally can afford to I can't let that issue be the reason why I'm not vocal anymore. But I do feel like people with legal status, and especially people with a lot of privilege, who are able-bodied, should be the people putting themselves on the line instead of letting our brown and black brothers and sisters and siblings without documentation put their lives on the lines. I think that there are people, I think that it is up to a lot of our privileged allies and accomplices to do just that, to be accomplices and to defy this these hateful rhetorics that we have. I think it is up to each and every one of us that have a small amount of privilege to do literally everything in our power to help people who are not, or who cannot go out there and be vocal.
And it's scary, like, it is scary. I have always been a privileged immigrant, right, with like student work status up to a green card now. And, you know, like, it's always you're an immigrant, and it's always in the back of your head, like, and I'm talking as a privileged one. Like, you can imagine what other people go through, you know, like, it's always in your back, in your mind, and like, I think it's up to, you know, personalities as well, how they handle the issue, and also like, if they have kids, you know, it becomes even more worrisome if you have other ties, if you have to really take care of your own grandmother, like, you know, there's stuff that prevents you from like being up there. And so I think that suggestion, like having other people who do not have to take into consideration all these issues, if they can come forward, right, and be allies and help, it's just powerful, and it's helpful.
And it gives people just so much hope, in the sense that you know that you're not there, but there are people fighting for you. And that has always, like, personally, as you know, I have always found it just so empowering, and so it just gives me so much hope when I see masses of white people just going out there and putting their lives and putting their bodies on the line, you know, like stopping buses from moving, shutting down entire ICE facilities, that kind of stuff. It just gives me so much hope that people who don't necessarily have, like, it doesn't have anything to, I mean, it doesn't affect you directly. Like, yes, you guys probably have friends and other people that you know that are undocumented, but the fact that you guys are going way out of your way to do something like that, to educate yourself, to put your life on the line, to getting arrested. I mean, we've seen people, you know, women and older folk, you know, just putting their entire, you know, their life on the line. You know, when was it? Yesterday I saw a post of an old woman in a cop car because she was in a demonstration, and she put herself out there so youth wouldn't get arrested. And that is, I mean, it's just fantastic that, I mean, somebody would do that. And it's also just, I mean, come on, you're arresting an older, you know, a senior citizen for doing what? Like, what is this person that is you? And it's just, I don't know, it's just so empowering. It gives people so much hope to see those kinds of movements happen, especially when people with privileges can do that for us who have for so long been in hiding. You know.
And I think a lot of people, you know, because we talk about there is like a younger generation that's really all about like being vocal about status, but I think that a lot of like older immigrants, like that's not the case. That's not the narrative, and so it's so important for allies to show up to these demonstrations because they're never going to have the numbers that they would have if people felt safe showing up to a demonstration that could end up in law enforcement intervention. And like we talked about, I mean, the consequences of your interactions with law enforcement when you're undocumented are dire. I mean, they're awful. So.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, like, I personally wouldn't have been as vocal as I am now. I mean, we lead protests all the time, and I speak at them publicly all the time, and I'm up here telling you guys I don't have papers. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't know that there are people that have privileges and that have access to finances and legal, people. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't know that those people would be there, to help me. And that is one of the biggest things that I always tell people that are undocumented or DACA recipients who want to come out and be more involved is like, look, just go out to these things and just look around at how many people are there and how many people support us, and just know that those people, have access to money, they have access to attorneys, they have access to all of this stuff. Get as close as possible as you can to these people, because I mean, if anything does happen, those are the people that we are going to be reaching out to help people like me and other people that are very vulnerable that do put themselves out in those situations. And that is one of the biggest things too that you guys should also be doing, is getting as close to undocumented people as possible to be able to help them financially, legally, and all that kind of stuff, emotionally, just so we can get by and so we can do the work that we need to be doing and humanizing the issue more. Because if you don't see us, we're not there. And it's always just, I know a friend of a friend who knows this person, but if we're there, it's hard to miss the issue.
In addition to the issue of engagement in activism, there's research and also just my own research has shown that there's also an unwillingness or at least an uneasiness about engaging with any kind of formal entities. I know I've heard before, anywhere where you have to fill out a form can be really nerve-wracking, right? Because then you get into social security numbers, et cetera, and it's and it can be really scary. And some of these formal entities are resource providing entities. So what resources are available and accessible to undocumented and documented people that y'all could share with us?
Well, for me, my mom is undocumented, and so every time we go to the doctor, they ask her for her social security, and she cannot get that. Just horrible, because she doesn't.
Okay. It's not okay, but
We're here.
do you want to stop for a sec?
Well, it really hurts a lot because, sometimes I have to live in the fear that my mom might not get the medical attention she needs, or that she might die or something, It's really bad.
Okay.
We're here. We're here.
I hate to make an example out of any kind of moment, but I just it's just really real,
Really,
and it sucks.
Terrifying.
And she's here talking about it, and sharing her experience. It's a bad situation. It's a bad situation. The immigration policy we have to live under.
But I think another a misconception that I don't think we addressed earlier is this sort of access to these resources, especially the governmental ones, right? That undocumented immigrants are sapping all of our welfare and taking our Medicare and it's just not true. Like, I don't know how, I don't want to like put anything eloquently because like there's just no way to put it other than it's just not true. Like the gatekeeping that goes on when you don't have status, when you don't have like a number to write down on a piece of paper, an ID to show someone, like you can't get your basic needs. Like you can be here and you can have made it from whatever persecution you were fleeing in your country, and like it's not enough. It's not enough to just be here. It's not easy to be here and have access to those documents that are going to allow you to get those access to those resources that you desperately need, life-saving resources.
And there's a trust problem too. Whenever I was at the border, I was there with 5 other students, and they just get dropped off the Greyhound. They have an area to stay, and it's very formal. You just engage them, and like you try for you to look at the paperwork, the documents that they provide you, and they just trust you because they've been put into a detention center. They've been giving them documents. Entities have made them sign stuff. So that even there, you have to take at least 2 to 3 minutes just to tell them I'm a law student, I'm here to actually help you, trying to explain you. And then the other side comes how to explain the process to them without being too dehumanizing, because the first thing I need to make them understand is that their identity is their alien number. That's the thing that you really have to understand that you need, because that's how they're going to identify you from here on out. And how do I do that? Telling them so you are not Jorge anymore. You're 2.
What is your number?
You were A something something.
Right.
It's literally called an alien number. It starts with the letter A.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
That is incredibly dehumanizing. I mean, come on, we all have names. We don't need a number to identify us. I mean, come on. Really, a social security number to be able to access health care? I mean, you have to have this number to be able to be seen as a human being that needs these resources, for fuck's sake. I mean, come on. Anybody needs these resources. Anybody should have access to housing and to food and to healthcare. It's not it's not that hard. It's not that hard to see a person that is suffering and say, hey, maybe, we should help you out with some food and shelter. And what you're sick, definitely should get you the health care that you totally should be able to have, because we are there. Technologically, we are there. There's no reason, absolutely zero reason, why anybody should be suffering. It doesn't matter, and especially because of your legality. Come on, and a number, for fuck's sakes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, I'll ask one last question.
The resources. There are resources, yes,
Oh, okay.
that are accessible to people without documentation. TU MLaw does a lot of work. They're always swamped, but you can always reach out to them. YWCA, Catholic Charities does a lot of work with undocumented peoples. They also have a food bank at Catholic Charities. They do clothing at Catholic Charities as well. I think you can do it once a month, or clothing once every 3 months or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. I used to go with my family, with my mom whenever I was younger. Some churches also have food banks as well. Iron Gate, I think, is another resource. If somebody has had somebody detained, the breadwinner detained, deported, they can get some resources at Iron Gate as well. DAOK, our phone number goes to my cell phone, and I can always help you try to find some sort of resources. DAOK also helps with DACA recipients renewing their DACA. We give out scholarships for the full $495 that we need every 2 years to renew. We can do the whole amount, but if we're kind of tight on money, we'll do half. Again, please donate, because we need it to help people all the time. New Sanctuary Network. You can mess with them on Facebook if you need any other resources. These 2 organizations, we tend to try to keep up with how many, with the resources that we do have here locally. So if you don't know, and if you can't find it on Google, please just call or message us on the New Sanctuary Network on Facebook, or call DAOK, message us on Facebook as well, and we'll definitely try to help find you guys some resources if you need them, and if we they went over my head. Yeah. Community Health Connection is a clinic here in Tulsa. They have 2 locations, one on 21st and Mingo and one on 3rd and Lewis. And they provide healthcare to a lot of people, and especially Spanish-speaking people. I don't think you need to give them your social security number. I go there and I don't give them my social security number. They do stuff on a sliding fee scale. Their dental is also on a sliding fee scale. I mean, and that's something that everybody could take advantage of, not just undocumented peoples. But yeah, those entities are very incredibly helpful. Yes.
Absolutely. So one last question, and then we'll turn it over. What does immigration justice look like to you, and how do we get there? Sorry.
Interesting.
Immigration justice, or immigrant justice, to me it looks like a place with no barriers. There are no walls, no barriers, nothing that would keep somebody from accessing something that they need. It be work, it be healthcare, it be, food and housing. I believe that justice is entirely intersectional. Immigration is a queer issue, immigration is a Black issue, immigration is, an issue, it's a religious issue. It's not just an issue of brown, south of the border people. It is an issue that is incredibly intersectional, so we have to tackle systemic racism. We have to tackle homophobia, we have to tackle transphobia, we have to tackle anti-Semitism. We have to do it all, and we have to realize that people are human. And until we realize that we are all human beings and nothing makes us lesser or more than each other, until we realize that entirely, in its entirety, we will not have the immigrant justice that we need, because we cannot allow for barriers that are just social constructs that we have just that have been just forced onto us, and we just believe because that's how we grew up. There's so much work to be doing for immigrant rights and immigrant justice, and it's not just about brown people south of the border. It's about, again, Black people, queer people, it's about everybody. And until we realize that, but that's what real immigrant justice would look to me. It would look like no borders. I'm very pro open borders, simply because a lot of immigrants were indigenous people at one point. A lot of immigrants had migration routes into North America as well, and that is something that we all need to keep in mind. That some people, yes, we were here before other people were.
Right, the border crossed you.
Yeah, the border crossed us. We didn't contain ourselves to Mexico for no good reason. And we have to definitely keep that in mind. And justice looks like giving people back access to their land and resources and identity.
Right, and also, for me, as you can probably could tell from this conversation, I'm kind of like a globalist. So I just think I'm also an upper borders kind of person, not only because it's morally, but because they have constructed a system that is global in nature. We live in globalization. So it just makes sense that we should create global policy that can tackle global problems. It's just logical to me. How we're gonna tackle nationwide, policy to global problems is never gonna be effective. So I just think that, and also understanding that, as a premise, as a fundamental premise, that immigration is a normal and natural phenomenon that has always been here. It's just with the social construct of nation state is that, so it has been more noticeable. But historically it's always been there, and I think now we have the resources, globally speaking, to be able to have more equality throughout the world, right? I think maybe 5 or 6% of population controls 50 or 60% of wealth. There's a distributive issue going on that is the actual problem, that immigration is just a symptom, right? And so like I think we need to be able to understand that we have come into a phase of humanity that we are now gonna be able to produce global answers, you know, and not only immigration. If you look at nuclear policy, for instance, how you're gonna regulate nuclear policy if not globally? How you're gonna regulate climate change and environmental laws if not at some sort of global scale? How you are gonna tackle immigration as well? So like all of these problems, like, you know, those 3 or 4 main problems that we're gonna have to deal with, because it's us that we're gonna have to deal with and our kids, right? These global problems that can have very detrimental consequences as a species. So I think we need to start thinking a little bit about that. How would that look? I don't know, but I think just having that conversation politically is very worthwhile, right? I think this author called Noah Harari has started talking about that is concerning that superpowers in all of in the elections are not even addressing these problems that can be catastrophic for us. So I think just having the conversation started will give us, you know, a little bit of latitude to deal with these issues later on, which I think we are late actually to the party. So we just have to like try to, you know, erase some of the, you know, the impact at least. So I think immigration justice will come from those, like it has to come from those kind of infrastructures.
Stephanie, what does immigration justice look like to you? That's okay. Better than this. So on that note, questions?
Hello.
Yes.
It seems like, to me, there's a lot of economic benefits to inviting more people into the country. Even starting with dignifying people as actual people, you know, in the process of inviting them to, you know, add to the culture, the labor, the economics of your municipality or your state or your country. And it seems like it's very important work that we talk about how we dismantle the really counterproductive system that we have. But how do we start talking about the benefits of immigration, of allowing people to become part of our culture? I know that Sweden was one of the few places that allowed North African immigrants to just kind of just open the door to everybody. And it worked out really well. They started out with like teaching languages, national language, and giving people job opportunity programs. But it shifted the economy of Sweden in ways that they didn't see coming, in good ways and bad. But do you guys know of anyone or any institutions, resources that are talking about what the benefits are of immigration, aside from, again, dignifying people as people, like adding so much, like, you know, here is like great food, great music, you know, just people different from me that have great stories, and you know, what are the benefits, the wealth of benefits?
Right. So this is a really good question. Some resource that I always use online, you know, and it's like easy to read and like it's very out there is I forgot actually the name of the entity, but it's run by Jose Antonio Vargas, which is a very well-known advocate for immigration. Has
Also an author.
Yeah, an author. Actually, he come to Tulsa like maybe 5 months ago or something like that. That has very good facts about, you know, the benefits of immigration economically, politically, culturally, right? Because, you know, it makes us, it allows us to learn more about the human experience because we are very diverse and that can help us grow as a society, right? And he has very, very good facts and statistics around many of the angles that you were talking about. So I would suggest for you to use, I think it's called something with Dream. But if you Google Jose Antonio Vargas, it will be the first thing that will pop up and has very good information.
Say that name one more time.
Jose Antonio Vargas.
can't think specifically of anything I've read recently that has been talking about like the economic benefits of bringing in, you know, more immigrants right now, but I have been seeing a lot of just sort of like the economic losses of you know, what's going on with immigration right now, in particular with agriculture, because we have a lot of immigrants who are, you know, agricultural workers, and I don't know the specifics of this, it's been a minute, and you know, like the political news cycle is so horrible that I can't remember anything ever, but you know, like we've got these jobs that are vacant now, so you know, stealing the jobs, nobody's taking the jobs, but you've got these positions that are vacant intending to these agricultural fields and whatnot, and so there's certainly like economic losses there because we're losing laborers. So it would maybe follow logically that if we gain more, it would be a positive thing.
One thing I do want to advise people against is when you're looking into, you know, all of that stuff, the economical stuff, please don't focus just necessarily on that. Just realize that like these people are more. We are more than an economical, what do you call it, tool for you know, people. We're more than workers. We're more than the money that we produce, the taxes that we pay, because we do pay taxes. Right. So just, if, you know, when you are looking into that, also look at it from a human point of view and not just how economically better we can make a situation. Please keep that in mind. I do, that's one of the things that just hurts me personally the most is whenever people talk about us as economical pawns and political pawns versus our, you know, talking about us like we are human beings. Yes.
I just wanted to add to the point that I gained citizenship 3 years ago, and it took over 16 years and over $17,000 to get my brother, me, and my parents through. And I think that is something that people don't think about as much also, but it really comes down to luck and money. Because when we got in on a month, with less than a month on this one loophole that they opened up for 3 months, and we got in, and really then after that it was like, cool, you got in, now there's $12,000 for this, there's $600 for this, if you misspell this, that's $350 fine that we have to redo. And even when I was going through the ceremony and got my paper, they said, you know, that your certificate has their name on it, and they said, if by the end of the day that you see something that is misspelled and you don't tell us, it's $350 to get a new certificate. And so I think that when we talk about dehumanizing and money and economics and all of it, it really comes down to, yeah, we want your money. If you have the money, then you can get this number, and then once you get, and that was also really weird too, that yeah, I had the alien number, and then you pay the money, and you sit, and you get presented this certificate, and then it's like, okay, hello, welcome to the world. You're acceptable now. Now you are a part of our community when I grew up here. And
you get a welcome letter in the mail.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that I feel like doesn't get talked about as much, is that, yeah, just do it legally. Well, not everyone has $17,000 and 16 years to spare with having nothing go wrong, and that's what it really comes down to, is can you have no medical issues, no, you know, my brother was a little shithead, you know, like, you know, can you keep your son from getting in trouble with his friends and for 16 years and have this money? And I think that just doesn't get talked about as much, of like, that you really have to live nothing can go wrong, and you have to make this money, and then you can join our society. And I just wanted, I guess, to highlight that.
Definitely. And to add to that, like some people, like if you do apply for citizenship when you're already here, like sometimes you have to will have to serve a penalty period of like at least 10 years or something. Like like you have to go back to your country of origin for like 10 years because if you stayed past the, 2-month, 3 point, 3 days, I don't know.
It's different points, it's different amount of time.
Yeah, you have to serve a penalty period, and people just don't have the 10 years of their life to spare. I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go back to this country that you left when you were like 5, and you're already like in your 20s. To do what? I mean, to just wait? I mean, you can. I don't know, I always feel like if I do it, I'm just gonna die at some point, so I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. I know that sounds very, like, sad, but, like, I mean, it's just kind of the way you think about it. I have my family here, and, like, yeah, it's definitely a class issue. Like, if you have all the money in the world, you can go anywhere you want. Nothing is gonna, you know, I mean, like, you can apply for citizenship, totally, that works, and because you have the money. If you don't, and if you're a working class person with a family, what does that mean for you? You know, and that is definitely, like, thank you for bringing that up. It's totally in it, like, I mean, it's, thank you.
And the financial costs aren't just, I mean, like, the fees that USCIS charges are exorbitant, right? Like, I mean, $17,000 for that whole process. If you are looking into DACA, which is specifically for, like, children or people who came here as children, so young people, and I mean, we know what the economy's like, they're not making that much. So, I mean, to renew your DACA, it's $485 every 2 years, and that's if you don't want, you know, that's if you're not going to pay a lawyer to help prepare your documents. If you don't speak English, you know, fluently, you're going to need a lawyer to prepare these documents. If you've had any complications with law enforcement, you're going to need a lawyer to help justify these things, and those fees start to get really expensive as well. The fees for once you're actually like doing a change of status are way more than that. And then there's travel involved in getting down to the Department of Homeland Security. And then there's just the awful fact that you have to be in the building with the Department of Homeland Security, and there's like a big picture of like Donald Trump in there.
Right.
Like, it's gross. And, so, like, it's awful. It's awful. Like, the financial and emotional costs are just, they're terrible.
Right.
Other questions? Yes.
Okay, I have a technical one and then a feelings one.
Okay.
Technical, I wasn't able to find it, and I'm sure you all are mad geniuses and know things. Do we have the right to film federal agents with the raid? Yes? Okay, great.
Yes,
Yes.
you do. You have to say, I'm filming, and that's pretty much it. You just have to, like, it just has to be audible, like, on the camera. Like, I mean, yeah. There is a good, United We Dream has really good resources on that kind of stuff. They have a, like a flyer now on their website that will tell you, like, the lookout, like, how you should go about filming ICE and stuff like that. So you should definitely take a look at, really, I mean, United We Dream has amazing resources, and you should definitely, I advise every one of you guys to go onto their website and just read through it. They have amazing stuff. Yeah, in different languages too, not just Spanish and English.
If I'm not mistaken, and I'm gonna look at me again. I don't think that you can film if you're inside a federal building. Is that, yeah, so.
You won't even be, your cell phone won't even be allowed in.
Right,
a federal
exactly.
building.
So, but yeah, as long as you're in a public space, then yeah, you have the right, and I would argue the responsibility. So, what was the emotions question?
And then the emotions question, how do you, this is specifically about dreamers, but doesn't necessarily have to be, but how do you feel about how oftentimes the dreamers that make headlines are like these outstandingly genius, amazing, like lived in a box and now like own a mansion, like these like outrageously successful people as like this is what dreamers are like, when it's like we're also ordinary people. How do you feel about that?
I feel gross about it.
Oh no, definitely. Like, it is one of the most, to me, it's incredibly repulsive because we expect dreamers or documented people or undocumented youth to live up to that. And a lot of us, like me personally, I didn't go to college. And I graduated from high school. I started working right out of high school and I got DACA. And it's incredibly, like, you're making us try, like, not everybody wants to go to college. Two, not everybody has access to the resources that we might need to be able to do that. And it's, again, it's kind of dehumanizing. The fact that so many people that we hear of, or that, you know, we hear this narrative of, like, the incredibly good, undocumented young person that went to college, that has, like, a, you know, master's degree and yada yada, and is, you know, has all of this stuff. You know, it's unrealistic in so many ways for so many immigrants, and especially to me it feels like it's an offense to our parents, the people who were the original dreamers, who brought, you know, who we came here with, who had this dream of us living better lives, and we're pretty much just, dehumanizing them and just giving, invalidating them, because they are blue-collar workers. They're the ones, working out of, restaurants, cleaning hotel rooms. They are laborers, and it's dehumanizing to them just seeing these expectations of immigrants now, not just dreamers, but now it's just this expectation of immigrants that is what we have to be, and it's really, to me, it's just really sad and invalidating, because I personally am not that. I have thought about going back to school or going to school, but that's me personally. A lot of immigrants just don't have the resources to do that, and a lot of people just can't. They don't want to, and we just really have to try to stray away from that, because that's not what we are as a whole, and it takes away from people's humanity,
Right.
because we tend to dignify this so much that this isn't right and this doesn't belong here, yeah, that's how I feel about that.
And I think that's actually a really cool question, because I think I can contextualize that to, I think, the broadest idea here in the United States, which is we need to follow the American dream. And the American dream is really a falsehood. It's just not the way it works, that you just move up and it's this classist thing, and there's a lot of systematic things that give opportunities to certain people and not to others, and that really prescribes the ability of moving up the ladder, or whatever that means. And I think that, as Rosa said, has a psychological effect, because it must be me that I couldn't do it because I'm flawed for some reason, because other people did it, and it's no, actually it's a systematic issue. You're just one of the many that just because of certain conditions around you didn't allow you to become that. And so I think is that problematic with the American dream narrative?
Definitely. Personally, that's something that I've always had an issue with. Was for the longest time I never, I always had an issue with being undocumented and telling people in the same sentence that I'm not a college student. And for some reason people find out about, my status, and they're like, oh, so where are you going to school? And I'm actually, I'm not. And there's always this look that people have, and I don't know if people do it intentionally, but it's this look then what are you doing? And it's, well, I'm working. I'm trying to live
everything.
Yeah.
It's this, I've always seen it, and I've heard it, and it's just invalidating. I want to be a human being and not have to just grind
Earn
myself.
your humanity.
Exactly. I don't want to
Right.
have to earn my humanity, please. Thank you. I was born. There should be enough.
And that's the message it sends, though, right? Is that to be human is not enough. That you have to you have to be exceptional. That you have to earn it. And beyond just the pressure, it's that. It's telling people that look, these are the immigrants we want. And it's fucking stupid.
That also leads to the good immigrant, bad immigrant narrative. And a lot of us immigrants have, to get past that, the myth of the good and the bad immigrant. It's, am I bad for not going to school? Are these people just great just because they went to school? Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I'm a priest, and our church has begun welcoming Latinos. So we have doubled our congregation. We have one person that is going to probably be deported in the next month or so. We've already lost one person, and our Latinos are afraid. And some of them have expressed the fear of coming to church because they're afraid that if this one person is there and could be deported, that maybe ICE will show up and deport all of them. Are there things that we can do as a church to protect the people that are there, at least while they're in worship?
Before we get into the question, I really just want to highlight what that story is an example of, right? we're showing that like the fear mongering that's going on is literally disincentivizing immigrants from finding community and from engaging in positive like life experiences. So anyway, like moving on with the question, like that's literally like what this is doing. I mean, like people are scared to go places where they're going to meet up with friends and get positive feelings out of it and fulfillment and practice their religion. And like that's not fair. Anyway, somebody answer.
Definitely. Like I think that one of the things that we could do before they get into service, is providing transportation for undocumented peoples. You know, taking your friend to church. I mean, it's always one of the best experiences, or one of the best things that you can do, is bonding with those people through faith. Personally, I do believe, and I am a heavy advocate for direct physical action. So I would always just say, assure your congregation that you will not let it happen, and don't let it happen.
Can I legally prevent them from entering? That's the question.
That's another thing I was gonna suggest also, like, and like maybe we can talk after it. I can like bring up the idea to some other students with the in-law society at TU, because we have way more experience than me actually, students that have been helping out in immigration issues. If we can actually do some sort of training to the people that organize masses in there, so like you can actually know exactly, or at least have that tool at disposal if actually ICE people show up. We can like perform some trainings of some sort, like a series of them, maybe 3 to people who organize around the church.
I want to assure them that they're safe, but I can't.
You can't.
Exactly.
I mean, that, sorry, can I?
Yeah,
That's a piece of it, right? That is at the heart of it, that we can no longer assure anyone that they're safe going anywhere. Not to court, not as a witness, not calling the police for domestic violence or rape, not going to church, we just can't. Now, it is also true historically that our ICE officers don't do these mad, unannounced raids, but they don't set policy. So if the order comes down tomorrow, like it's been threatening for the last month, that you're going to do these raids, it's not up to our particular ICE officers to decide whether or not to do it. So that is also at the heart of it, right? Is that how do we live in a world where we can no longer say, no, it's okay, you're going to be safe, you're going to church, right? Historically also, a church is seen as a sacred place that ICE won't enter, but the parking lot is not. And so, again, Rosa's idea of providing transportation it is really crucial. In a city that has no public transportation, people are forced to drive. An undocumented person is not entitled to a driver's license in Oklahoma. So therein lies the, oh, you didn't put your blinker on when you turned, and so, throw some racial profiling in the mix, and you don't have a driver's license, I'm going to take you to jail, and that is really, so, but I really want, I don't want to inflict pain on you, but I do want you to understand and feel what it is to be able to say to someone, I can't keep you safe, right? What does that mean? As a clergy, what does that mean, right? As a community, what does that mean to us?
To me, also, and what extent are you willing to go to keep your congregation safe? Is one of the biggest things that I would ask myself. And I understand that you might not be able to keep a federal officer from taking somebody, but what extent are you willing to go to keep that person safe, and what extent is your congregation willing to go through to keep that person safe? Because not every legal action and not every action by a federal agency is humane and is just. And we always have to keep that in mind. And we have to keep in mind that this administration is taking away so much humanity from people, and we have to keep in mind that it is up to us at the end of the day to act against injustice. And we always have to question, we always have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to do for our brothers and sisters and siblings?
Do we have a right to forbid them to speak to anyone other than the person they have a warrant for?
Well, so they will never show up with a warrant. That's what Jorge was saying, is that for years, they've gotten away with showing up with a document that's called a warrant, that's only signed by an ICE officer or supervisor. That is not an arresting document.
So we can.
So you can, first of all, put your body in front of the person and say, let me see your warrant. Do you have a warrant for arrest for this person? And whether or not that will work, and again, what Rosa's question is that you all have to decide how far you're willing to go, right? So the other thing that you should know is giving somebody sanctuary, providing somebody where there is a lawful reason for arrest is illegal for you, right? And again, there are churches around the country that have decided to do just that, but that's a bigger conversation with your congregants, right? So it is a piece of advising your parishioners, for example, never say a word except I want a lawyer. Never sign anything, because ICE is really good at saying, here, sign this and you get to go home. Well, how do you define home, right? It's not your home in Tulsa. And so they are really manipulative. So never, ever, ever sign anything. Never saying anything except I want to talk to an attorney. And then you all taking on the duty of calling one of us, calling Rosa, calling New Sanctuary, calling to you to say, we need lawyers. I will also forewarn you that there are very few free or low charge lawyers in the city of Tulsa. It is a major problem. And so another thing that you can talk about as a congregation is fundraising to have legal funds ready. Bond, if they get bond under an immigration proceeding, is really expensive in Tulsa. They're usually looking at $10,000. And unlike criminal bonds, you don't pay 10%, you pay the entire $10,000. So we have been asking people around who are activists we need a bond fund in this city. We desperately need a bond fund to the extent we can get somebody bond. But legal fees funding is really, really, really important. So if you can't prevent something on the front end, can you prevent it on the back end? And there's, ICE officers are human. So they get enough phone calls and protests about someone that they've arrested that really has an incredible community here. You never know how much you'll get. We've been successful, minimal amount of times, but we have been successful. So those are little things that you can think about. Money and resources are a huge problem. Huge.
Definitely.
Yes.
I have a question. So we've talked about needing the warrant signed by the judge, but then also talked about how these sweeps can happen if we're looking for someone that looks a certain way. I have a couple friends that are undocumented and that I might give rides to, and one of these people mentioned that they're walking around downtown last week and police officers stopped and was asking about documentation, asking a lot of questions and saying, well, we're looking for someone that looks like you. Mm-hmm. What if I'm with this friend? What if I get pulled over or I'm walking on the street? How can I protect this friend in that instance where that line is blurred of that actual warrant from a judge?
Well, video at first.
Right.
Video
Yeah.
it.
I think a lot of that stuff, I think a lot of people just know that it's wrong, and once they're on video, we'll be like, and start to get a little bit hesitant because you do have, a recording of this person committing an injustice. And again, just
Like
saying
question
to you,
or actions?
yeah.
Actions heavily. Like,
Yeah.
why are you asking this? Why are you, just like literally make them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Just like Mimi said, they're people.
Yeah, definitely, and definitely questioning the reason why they're asking those things, or the reason why, if you do get, pulled over with this person in the car, why are you pulling me over?
Yeah.
What did I do? And just questioning and asking if they're gonna be taking you in, and if they don't have a reason to, am I free to go? Are we free to go? Because you should be. And
as Mimi said too, if you cannot tackle in the front end, maybe in the back end, so video, anything that you can do to record instances so that later in the process you can bring stuff up. It's very volatile, my understanding is immigration law, and there's no too much due process.
Right, that's one problem we have is if you or I, as a white person, were to be stopped for no reason, we would automatically say that's a violation of my Fourth Amendment right, see ya, and walk away. People of color don't have that privilege in our country, and in particular right now, immigrants don't have that. But if someone is riding as a passenger and the cop asks for an ID, it is not illegal to ride in a car without an ID. So why are you asking my passenger for an ID?
But the whole you look like someone thing, your skin, your hair color, your eye
Okay,
color.
so where's your warrant?
Okay.
And this
so-
person isn't talking to you, they are waiting for their attorney.
So even with those sweeps, if you're looking for one person and 5 people can go, it still needs that same judge warrant?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is the sweeps are much harder, but the more that you can make arguments, and this is where United We Dream, the ACLU, this is where you all should educate yourselves in terms of what you can do. And they have cards that you can carry, they have cards that people can give that just say, I'm not willing to talk to you, I'm calling my attorney. There are all kinds of resources around. But the more that you can say, what is it that you're looking for, and this person has rights, the better off that person is going to be. But again, I just want to stress, in these times, and the reason we need so many people of privilege on the front lines is because this is so out of control. To say that we are dangerously close to Germany in the 1940s is no longer any exaggeration. We're talking roundups, we're talking very few rights. So many things that we see that would be lawsuits if it was my family, but we don't have the resources to bring all these lawsuits, and that's why we need really, really, really loud voices. And I will just say that at TU we have spent an enormous amount of energy and time making really good relationships with our ICE officers. And recently they made us a promise. You have someone who's arrested just on a traffic violation, you call us. So we're waiting to test that. To put their money where their mouth is, and we've done that before, and they've put up. So it becomes really important to contact one of us so that we can begin. There may be things that we can do that you all can't, but at the end of the day, we should be terrified and infuriated that this is how people are treated in the United States. Just infuriated.
And it's about precedents to set up as a country as well, because now can this be translated into other identities or groups of people? It's terrifying, at least legally.
Oh, good. Anybody have, no.
No more questions.
There were so many hand signals.
Thank you everybody for coming. Stick around, if they're willing to stick around and talk, you're welcome to stick around and talk out that way. But yeah, so thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Don't forget to join us in August too for the education field talk.
Colby Webster.
Hey, Colby, Mimi Martin, nice to meet you.
You too. My girlfriend, the one that spoke there about
Okay.
16-year-long
$16,000.
naturalization process. She's actually going through. She had to leave for work. She's actually supposed to be there at 3:30, but she's really invested in this whole conversation, wanted to be here. But she's going through a paralegal program right now, and she's looking for some work and anywhere in the legal field to get networked in and get through the process.
So we've never done, we've never had a paralegal, but that's not to say we wouldn't.
Okay.
So what I would suggest to her is if you can give her my card, tell her to call me. I'm not sure what we could do, but we have been taking more interns than we used to just because of the amount of work that we
I
have.
was going to say she's also looking for volunteer work. So.
Yeah, so we can, or these guys can always hook her into activism too, but tell her to call me. I run the clinical program now at TU, and I am interested